Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's Judi Glova, and today is day 3 of the Burnout Solutions series. And I have collected some of the best experts for you to teach you about how to have your own burnout solution. And I'm excited because today is all about authenticity, how to stop proving your worth and own your value to be seen, heard, and respected. And I want to remind you that we're meeting every day throughout this online series in our Facebook group called the More Than Enough Women's Circle. I'll be live this evening, so don't miss your chance to have a conversation with us and a live Q&A. I want to make sure that you can take action on the tools and skills that you learn each day. So if you haven't already, head on over to the More Than Enough Women's Circle. Now, before we kick off, let me introduce you to our expert today. It is Kerry Gallant, and Kerry is a women's leadership coach and certified conversational intelligence coach. She is a negotiation consultant for global companies, and she's a former executive lawyer and adjunct professor in negotiation at the University of British Columbia Law Faculty. She has been a speaker at the American and Canadian Bar Associations, national medical conferences, the California Women's Conference, and interviewed on several podcasts. So, Kerry, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Judi. I'm so delighted to be here as well.
And I want to just kick off with, a real general question, but why do you think burnout is such an epidemic these days?
Wow, that is such a great question. I think for many, it's the speed up speed of our universe right now, and digital devices, all the technology that's made everything faster and easier, so-called. It also seems to have speeded up the requirements for us to deliver. And then there's also multiple different pressures that everybody feels under. I was doing a workshop yesterday for a group of women lawyers, and this is a very big issue for them. That feeling of being pulled in different directions. Mm-hmm. And for many women, it's this multiplicity of role expectations and what the expectations are on us as women leaders, as women professionals, as business owners, and then our roles as mothers, for those of us who are mothers. And even when we're not mothers, it's the expectation that we might be doing things in a certain way and perhaps not in another way. And so the challenges of being whole and authentic and true to oneself, and to be the very best leader, the very best lawyer, the very best, whatever it is that you're doing, is really quite challenging because we're unsure, many of us, on what it is we're supposed to be doing, when, and how.
Wow. Well, I mean, you just probably laid out 10 golden nuggets right there. But I want to emphasize the main one, which is, we have this multiplicity, right? There's like all these roles and all these shoulds that we have in terms of being women. And that definitely points to us feeling like we have to be, so superhuman in some ways, And I also want to mention the fact that, our focus today on our talk is really being able to focus on, amplifying your ask to earn your worth and get a better deal with authentic negotiation. Mm-hmm. So part of what I want to talk about too is your expertise in negotiation, because I do think that women have a hard time negotiating. Mm-hmm. And, I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that, but, what do you think women need to know about negotiation? Like, what's the most important thing? Like, what's the primary foundational piece that we need to remember about negotiation?
Okay, so there's so many things. I could go in so many different ways, Judi. It's my challenge to distill that down into one. And based on all my conversations with women and the difference that negotiation tends to have for women, and there's ample research to bear this out, is the thing I'd want most women to remember at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, that negotiation is a conversation, right?
Right.
That is really all it is. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's simple, because so many of our conversations are complex and difficult. And sometimes negotiation, yes, can be a difficult conversation, especially if we are uncertain. And ambiguity, uncertainty is one of the big holdbacks for women, and the research proves this out actually. So we can talk lots about how to get beyond that, but that's not something that really can stop many women in their tracks.
Right. So why do you think negotiation though is so important for women in the world? Like, why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think negotiation is something that we actually do a lot, and we may not recognize that we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And negotiating and influencing is something that we need to know how to do, and to do well, and to do it in furtherance of the goals that we have for our lives, for our families, for our businesses, for our careers. Because really, at the end of the day, if you want to do something that requires the cooperation of another person, then influence and negotiation is part of that. It's part about how do you come together for something that's effective and meaningful for you and for them. And that's really what an effective negotiation is at the end of the day, is something that you arrive at that has a meaningful and productive outcome for both or all parties.
Yeah. And what's so interesting too is that again, it's almost counterintuitive, because you would think, because women are so collaborative, like we really love to collaborate, that negotiation would be so hard. So I'm wondering, like, what are the things that get in our way? Because to me, I know that there's certain things that trip up, negotiation. Yeah. So what would you say to that in terms of, like, what do you think gets in our way?
Yeah, well, a bunch of things. So the theme of your work and this week, and you mentioned, was prove your worth and own your value. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a big hang up. That's number one hang up for many women. That's why you do what you do. That's why I do what I do, right? Especially when it comes to for women, is we don't have a lot of history behind this. Let's put it this way too. So we have thousands and thousands and thousands of years of a different history as women than as men, in terms of our place in society, our role in society, our ability to have our own money, to have our own credit, right? That was 1976 in the US and Canada was the first time women were allowed to have their own credit without a cosigner, i.e. their husband.
Wow.
So, we have a recent history. So aside from all that baggage that might be behind us, then we also have a couple other places that can be blockers. And again, long before there was actually research to back this up, I was seeing this in ample evidence in the people that I was working with and the women I was talking with, even in my own life. Mm-hmm. And there's one key distinction that shows up for women that doesn't show up for men, and that's when we're negotiating for ourselves versus negotiating for others.
Oh.
Now we have research that proves this, that for men, whatever they are on the scale in terms of their capability, their strength, their ability, how often they initiate negotiation, or how well they do with negotiation, they're the same in both contexts. That's what the research shows. But for women, this key distinction, and I heard this over and over again in my early days when I was doing this work, I'm a great negotiator at work. I'm the top of the sales. I negotiate sales every day. And this is what I would hear, right? Or senior women lawyers who negotiate every day on behalf of their clients, who tell me they can't negotiate for themselves out of a paper bag.
Wow.
And so this distinction is a really important one.
Well, that is huge. Like, I really want women to hear that we have a hard time negotiating for ourselves, right? Because, and again, we'll get into the maybe the deeper why with that. But I also want to go back to, it kind of piqued my ears up, 1976.
Yeah.
Historically, and I had heard this before from someone else, that that was the first time that women could have credit and have their own checking account.
Right.
Like
their own personal one, not a joint one, not a co-signer, right. In their own right.
This isn't that long ago. So no wonder why we didn't have worth, because we weren't even allowed to have our own money. Exactly. We weren't even allowed to own our money, own our the energetic, symbol of worth, right? Because if we think about money being a material symbol of our worth, right? Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And the broader piece of that, Judi, is that I believe, and I think the research shows this out too, and I think if you ask a group of women and ask them this, how and when were you taught that it was okay to have your own want? for yourself, not on someone else's behalf, but your own want. So when I ask women, what do you want? It's often fuzzy, right? It's often fuzzy. And so that's why in my model, I start with clarity. That clarity is the first place we want to spend some time on, is what is it that you really want? And this is a broader picture of what is it you want in your life and what's important to you. And it's also about the negotiation that you're in. And I like to do the background piece with my clients because it helps them get really into tune with why something's important to them, is doing all that background personal work so that there's a ground to stand on. There's a foundation, a solid foundation to stand on in any negotiation.
Absolutely. And I want to dovetail on what you said. How often do we even think about our needs, right? Mm-hmm. What do we need? What do we want? It's like those questions that we don't ask ourselves because we're so used to worrying about what everybody else's needs and wants are, right? Mm-hmm. So ours come last. But I have to say, I think about that movie Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts, where the guy kept on asking her what kind of eggs she wanted for breakfast, and she always had the same eggs that he had, like however if he liked sunny side up or he liked scrambled eggs. And it's like that movie just reminded me of how often women, we just do what everybody else is doing, and we just we go along to get along. Oh, yeah. So in negotiation, like you said, it's like us having that foundational clarity of what do I want? Mm. And what are my non-negotiables, right? Like, what am I willing to, how willing am I to stretch that want? And where's the top edge and where's the bottom edge, right?
Yeah. That's so true. And it's so true that, that idea of having boundaries is often a tricky place for many women. We might have boundaries, but are we really utilizing them? Do we prioritize those boundaries? I heard someone say that your priorities are meaningless without boundaries.
I love that. Your priorities are meaningless without
boundaries. And that's boundaries that you're willing to stand by. And so the bottom line in a negotiation is a type of a boundary. When you've identified the place, I don't like using the word bottom line because it ends up, we fixate on the bottom line. And I want people to fixate upwards, right? That's why I call it amplify your ask. You want to look upwards and look at the anchor up top that you want to set rather than the one down in the bottom.
I love that.
Inexorably, we want our view to go upwards rather than downwards. However, it's important to know that place where, that won't work for me. Right? It's important to know that place.
To say that without guilt.
Yeah.
Literally, I had a conversation with a client yesterday where, we were talking about how, she's really learning how to say no. And she said, oh, but I felt that pang of guilt. Mm-hmm. I felt it. She's like, I was really conscious of it when I said no, or when I said, oh, that doesn't work for me. And she did it anyway. But it's like, think about, we have this natural reaction of guilt or feeling, shame or whatever it is, to have our own wants and needs and have our limits, having our boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And part of that too is that it's also in the surrounding world around us expects that of women. So there's there's a lot of talk these days about implicit bias. And we forget that bias isn't always implicit. Sometimes it's actually explicit. It's just not said so. But sometimes there are structural things that create the bias as well. There may not be somebody who's intentionally going out and saying, no, you can't do this as good a job as a man, or you can't play tennis as well as a man. But there are those expectations overall, because we're all living in the same society. Yes, we might be in different countries, we might be in different cities and small C cultures, but we are living in the same society that holds these views. And so we're part of that. So when women act against that norm, that's also a risky place for women to be.
Oh, okay.
When we step outside the norm, that's why we feel guilty. We feel uncertain. We feel shaky. We feel, I don't know if I can do this, right?
Yeah, because it's all these unwritten norms that we've bought into, all that programming and whatnot. So I don't know if we've already addressed it or not, but what do you think is the biggest mistake that women make when negotiating?
Well, I actually have I have a report I do about the 10 mistakes that women make in negotiation. It was a really tough one to title. because I actually don't think we make a lot of mistakes. I think these are more challenges than they are mistakes.
Okay.
However, we'll read it when it's 10 mistakes more than we'll read it when it's about 10 challenges, right? So you kind of got to go with that a little bit. And I always say that the number one mistake that any negotiator makes, and so this includes women, is not preparing. Is not doing any preparation. And it's actually, this is a place that actually supports women probably even more than men, because we like to be prepared. We like to do the research, right? In fact, one of the things we tend to do more of is we over-prepare, right? Or if we have perfectionism, as many women do, we think we can never do enough preparation, and so we never actually do the thing that we're preparing for. And that can include a negotiation, to over-prepare to the point where I'm not prepared yet, and so I will never ask. But we do want to have preparation, to have that, again, it's that solidity of the ground that we can stand on, to do the homework and get the data that support whatever place you're trying to take in your negotiation. Many negotiations are, well, all negotiations are pretty much about some kind of exchange of information. And so your data and research, whatever that might be, that supports what it is you're trying to achieve, can be really important. And especially as women, because of the expectations, we sometimes have to prove it more than a man might have to prove it, whether it's in career or business or, buying a car even, is come prepared with that data. So I would say preparation is number one. It can give that sense of confidence and ability to move ahead, rather than being uncertain and fuzzy. And that preparation,
and wishy-washy, right?
Exactly.
Because I love how perfectionism can actually work for us in this in this situation, because I'm always looking for how can perfectionism work for us. But yeah, this is a way where we can be prepared and be ready for the conversation. And yeah, I mean, I do have to say I'm definitely a recovering overthinker. So, trying to overthink things, but to your point, in this scenario, it probably works to our advantage to do that.
Yeah.
So it's really, so what we've been talking about is, not only why it is that women have not always been, good negotiators, looking at our worth and our worthiness, looking at what's one of the mistakes that we make, but also what do we want to think about in terms of what are the benefits of becoming really good at negotiating?
Oh, great. Well, great question. And first I want to actually go back to something you said about women not being good negotiators. So I want to take that one on. That's okay. I want to take it on only because it is a myth that women aren't good negotiators.
Okay.
We can be exceptional negotiators when we are primed in the right situation. So i.e. we're either negotiating for someone else, or if we're negotiating for ourselves, we've removed the other challenges or blocks that prevent us from doing our best. One of which is if we're overemphasized on what it feels like to negotiate for ourselves, then one of the things I have my clients do in their clarity piece is get really clear on who else can benefit. Who else benefits from your negotiation? Because we need to kind of bring in often we have to bring in that we are in fact negotiating for someone else. It's not just about us, right? So use that piece. If it's part of your DNA in the way that you are raised or you believe or are motivated as a woman, and when society expectations say that women do things for others, then use that to your advantage in your negotiation. Even think, I'm actually negotiating for my family. I'm actually negotiating for my company. I'm actually negotiating for Judi Glova, CEO of the company. The Judi Glova Inc. I'm negotiating for that company, right? Do whatever it is you need to do to trick your brain into looking at it dispassionately from that perspective rather than getting caught up. And so the benefits, to your question, of negotiating are, what can you do for others, right? When you negotiate and you up your skill level, if that's something that's missing for you and you're not sure how to do it, or you're not sure of the environment, or you're not sure of the quote rules of the game, or how to engage with someone in this particular context, because negotiations take place in all kinds of different contexts, then get some help, get some help with that. And when you do negotiate and you stand up and you ask for what you want, you might not get it, but if you don't ask, the chances are very good that you won't get it. And so you increase your chances of getting the thing that you're looking for. You increase your opportunity for new projects, new growth, new business opportunities, new career opportunities. And Judi, in the employment world in particular, and I think this is also true in the entrepreneurial world, when you're negotiating for yourself in front of your boss, in front of your leader at your business, all of a sudden they look at you differently, right?
Absolutely.
Even if you don't get everything you want, when you are negotiating and you're using your collaboration skills so that you are getting something, they're getting something, and you're looking like you're working together. And I always look at that. How can you position it that there's something in it for them and there's something in it for you, and you're willing to work with them to come to an agreement? How can we do this together? And that capitalizes on the we language that women are not a better position than men. It's more that was more of an expectation that we are going to take other people's needs into account. So using that we to using it within your negotiation. And so you can create better relationships. You can actually preserve and even improve relationships. There's often a fear that if I ask for what I want, I'm going to ruin the relationship, or they're going to feel uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh. Right? Can I tell you, I literally had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day of like, oh, well, I don't want to ruin the relationship by asking for what I want. And I'm like, this is a business, this is a business relationship. And I was just like, wow, well, you have to be able to deal with that. But I really want to hone in on this question about what do we do when we hear no? Because I think, and I mean, I have to say, I do it too. I get all tight and I'm like, oh, I just heard no. What do I do? So what is it? What do we do when we hear no?
Okay. So first, take a breath.
Okay.
The world is not at an end.
Right.
They have not told you they hate you. They have not told you you're a wrong person or you're a bad person. They have not rejected you. They have rejected the offer. So there's this is one of the many mindsets that we can get trapped and wrapped up in.
Huge. This is a huge one.
Stop us from asking, right? I'm afraid they're going to say no. When I talk to, especially to students about job negotiation and salary negotiation, the first thing I always get asked is, well, what if they pull the offer off the table? That's the number one fear. What if they pull the offer off the table? Well, first of all, we got to correct that happens in the most minuscule number of cases in most negotiations. Why would they pull it off the table?
Right.
You've offended them by your ask, potentially, or you're so far out of the realm that it doesn't make any sense to continue. So they might pull the offer. That's in any negotiation, the other party is only going to pull the offer in some of those situations. But the thing here is that's true is that if what they've offered you does not work for you, then that's a bad deal.
Right. So
it's not necessarily a bad thing in that particular outcome. But as I said, it's a rare outcome. But that's the number one fear.
Right.
And then
oh my God, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then for women, it becomes they're going to reject me. And that's where it becomes that distinction again. They've rejected your offer. They haven't rejected you. And when they say no, that doesn't mean never. That just means right now. Something that if you've said something, I would like to have, you're in a negotiation for something and you say, well, what I'd like to see is my negotiation offers, I'd like to see us settle the deal at $150,000. Let's just pull a number out of the hat for that. And the other party says, well, no, that won't work for me. It's not the end of the story.
Right.
Okay, well, let's go back. Let's take a look at what would work for you. So you want to go back into using some key questions that will help to move the energy. It's not stuck energy. It's only stopped for the moment. We want to keep it going and find out what are the other possibilities here. So we get trapped in this either or black or white thinking, right? And most negotiations have a multiplicity of potential that is available if only we are willing to explore it.
So here's, I want to get your opinion on this because this is something that I did really early in my career. And I think it was because I read it somewhere, but whenever I went for a new job, I would always ask for at least $5,000 or $10,000 over what I was currently making, not knowing, you never really know what the salary range is. And I always did that because I wanted wiggle room. I wanted to be able to have at least, number one, I wanted to see whether or not I would get it, right? And depending upon the job, we can even think in terms, of even more. But I always wanted to be able to see like how much I could, what was their no? Sometimes I wanted to know, like, where would they say no? And what would they come back to? So in some ways, I think I love what you said about no is not the end. No is not personal. But I think too, go for the no. Like maybe it's even us being able to think about, go for the no and find out where their edge is and then negotiate down from there and know where our stop line is. It's like, no, because, you could actually get more than what you wanted and then be really super stoked about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Judi, because you're taking it and flipping it around to the braver side of things. And it's also about being clear about what you want too, right? So that's the first step. And then being clear what you don't want, and then absolutely going for that no of their no is a great place, because you know where their boundary is. You know where your boundary is. Now you've found where their boundary is. And chances are good, if you haven't gone so far above where they are, that they're like, oh, that's it, I'm out of here, right? That they'll reject that there's a deal at all. And there's a way to save that too. But for our purposes, what we're looking at, I absolutely love that, because one of the things you do want to do is make sure, because women, I see this a lot, I'll just offer what's reasonable.
Right.
Where I think they'll end up. Please go for that extra 5-10% first, because when you do that, you can always come back from there. You can always go lower, but you can never go higher.
Right, exactly.
There's psychology in there called anchoring. There's this concept, and marketers do this all the time. And the anchoring piece is really important. So you want to make sure that if they're going to set their anchor here, you want to be sure that you've set your anchor somewhere a little bit further, a little bit, maybe a lot further than where you think you will end up or where you even want to end up. Right. Add that buffer, add that little buffer that you talked about.
Absolutely. And I have to say, so many people that I talk to that are in overwhelm, that are in that state of burnout, it's like they haven't been asking for what they want. And like negotiation is such an important, influencing and negotiating is such an important thing. So even if we make little tiny tweaks, right? It's not like we have to be expert negotiators overnight, but just learning to ask and getting the no and not feeling that guilt or that shame or that, the devastation or taking it personally. It's like, if we could just learn to ask more, right? So it's like that one every day, ask for what you want, make it gets easier and easier and less, it just gets less stressful if we practice it.
Yes.
And then when the time really comes, when we really need it, it's probably so much easier. Well, oh my gosh. Well, again, I have like so many golden nuggets that we talked about today, and I just want to read through a few of them. Clarity, definitely clarity, preparation is so, so important. Making sure you know why you're doing it. So why is it, the bigger purpose, right? Knowing why you're doing it. Being able to have your boundaries and definitely actually ask for what it is that you want, not in the fear of ruining a relationship. Being able to expect a no and be okay with no, and no is not personal. And really go for that win-win, considering that we are women and we do care about other people's needs, right? Being able to have that conversation so that we can get to a win-win or no deal, right? But letting it be a dialogue, not a monologue, not a if this, then that, oh, we're done. And kind of having the mindset of, well, this is a conversation. It's not just a please may I have and yes or no. It's the back and forth. It's learning how to dance instead of just learning how to pitch. Let's dance instead of pitch.
And actually, I love that, because I often equate it to dating.
Okay.
So in the sense that there's a lot of negotiation that goes on, especially in the early part of dating, before you cement the relationship by going for the big commitment ceremony or whatever it is you're doing. And I'll often say, no deal is better than a bad deal. And so think about it like dating. If it's not working, if it's the attraction's not there, the ability to see each other's point of view isn't there, there's not a good connection, then we walk away from those relationships, or we say thank you very much, let's part as friends. I know it's not easy. No,
Right.
it's not. It's difficult. But
It
at the
is.
end of the day, you're much happier when you're with somebody with whom you can be simpatico, or whatever it is you're looking for in a relationship. And the same in negotiation. Look at what
Absolutely.
it is you can do together.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, you part as, people that have just not been able to come to a deal.
And you know what? I'm just going to dovetail quickly on what you just said, because again, I had another conversation with a client the other day about this, and she is in a partnership and she knows her partner is probably going to retire soon. But it seems so like, how do you say, like walking on eggshells, talking about like, what is his exit strategy? What's going to be a win-win? Because they didn't set it up in the beginning of how they were going. And right, like partnerships, sometimes the best partnerships are the ones where you actually have the exit strategy, thought of at the time that you create the partnership.
Yes.
So, I had even said to her, it's like, start with what you want, right? We have to get really clear about what you want, but also approach it as first a listening experience to find out, well, what would a win-win look like for you?
Yeah.
Right? Like knowing what she wants, but just opening up the conversation without feeling afraid, and knowing that it doesn't have to be like you don't have to go completely to like closing the deal, just opening up the dialogue. What do you think about that?
I love it because, I love it for two reasons. One is that in business partnerships, I see it all the time when people get into a business partnership, they've had a brief conversation, they're all excited about the idea, and then don't sit down and to have this conversation about what do you envision for this, to see if your visions align, right? The company's going to be successful when the company has a clear vision. And what is it you're looking to achieve? And I love this idea of looking towards the end. When will we know we're done? When will we know that we want to actually walk away? And actually having those kinds of terms of engagement, like it's not like, how will we do business together? How will we be in partnership together? So it's the what and the how that are important pieces. And to not be afraid of contracts. Contracts are literally, they are, they're writing up the conversation and the expectations. That's what a contract is designed to do, is to clarify the expectations. So, 6 months down the line, oh, remember we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z? No, right? Well, let's go back. Let's check our records, right? Let's go back to the terms of engagement. That's what a contract is designed to do. So don't be afraid of contracts. That's what they're designed.
Well, in this scenario, it's been 20 years since they've been working together and they never had that agreement. So now it's like baby steps. It's like, okay, have the conversation first, open up the dialogue. It is.
Time to do that.
Yeah. I mean,
well, as a mediator too, this is one of the areas that we often see a lot of conflict and a lot of disputes that either go to court or they come to mediation, and they're really messy because there hasn't been a conversation anywhere along the line. And so this is a great time for them to be doing it so that they can design the future, even as they're separating, but they're designing the future.
And I really want to dovetail on another thing that I heard. It's like, having clear agreements, not fuzzy agreements. Like you said, having things written down, having contracts, that's actually a really good thing. It's a smart thing. And it's how, we can even have clear agreements with other people about specific, projects. I mean, maybe if they're just small little projects at work. But to me, clear agreements is like a standard I have. I like to make sure I said I'm going to do this. You said you're going to do that. Okay, let's just write it down to make sure that we're there so that we have a sense of owning our worth and what they said that they're going to do and the promise, right? And having that meeting of the minds. So, oh my gosh. So again, we've gone through at least 12 golden nuggets in this particular interview. So thank you so much. And Kerry, I have one other question though. If you could give our businesswomen one thing that you really want them to remember from either our conversation or just one thing to remember about negotiation, that's the most important, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Again, there's so many things that I love to leave women with, and I like what you said about the baby steps. And I often tell people, even when they come to my workshops, this is great to spend the time and invest the time to learn how to do it. And please don't leave it until the big high stakes conversation. Start applying what you're learning, even tips from today's call, in some small way, to start asking, to start negotiating more often, more frequently, so that it's like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym and start to try to lift 100 pounds over your head the first time when you're 100 pounds yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? But when you start doing that 1 rep at a time, and then 3 sets, and then 5 times a week, and then by the time 6 months have rolled around, oh my God, you've got muscles,
Yes.
right? You can do this with your eyes closed. Well, yeah, you can do it with your eyes closed. So this is the idea: is you want to start now. Don't leave it for the big stakes conversation, because this is going to be uncomfortable. And like any new habit, we do it with repetition over time until it becomes less uncomfortable. And it might never feel like it's completely comfortable, but that's what life is, right? We take some of these small risks in order to get big rewards, and
Absolutely.
to keep the eye on the prize of the thing that matters most to you.
Absolutely. And I think, the women in our audience, they're business leaders, right? Whether they work in a corporation or they work for themselves or they're entrepreneurs, it's really when we are leaders, we give up the right to stay in our comfort zone.
Right.
So I think this is one of the skills that is like top, essential basic skills that we need to have. And you know what, maybe we need to be reminded of it and, have those regular reminders. So I love how you're talking about, take those baby steps. Don't wait till the big, the big, hard, crucial conversation to actually have that. So Kerry, thank you so much. You have been so generous with your time and, just giving us this amazing information and your years of experience and insight. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Judi. It's been an honor to participate today, and I wish you and your audience all the best. And if I can be of any help, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kerry. And I also want to thank you again for being so generous with your free gifts. So everybody, if you haven't already done so, make sure you click on the free gift that Kerry has developed for us. And if you haven't already purchased your Backstage Pass, you still have a chance to do so. And if you do have the Backstage Pass, you get access to her bonus gift, as well as all the other bonus gifts. So that's worked into this program because you don't have to worry that you're going to miss anything, and you get the bonuses. So make sure you get your Backstage Pass, you get all the bonuses, and you're able to download all of this game-changing content for you to have on your phone, on your computer, and you can access it at any time. And sometimes you'll want to access it when you really need it, especially when we're talking about negotiating. This has been so amazing and so rich in terms of the content that we've had today. So the other thing I want to leave you with is, instead of burning the candle at both ends, remember to let your light burn brightly, knowing that you're more than enough. Most importantly, you can create your own burnout solution, and you don't have to do it alone.